I'm Dan Snow. Welcome to Voices of the First World War. In the years leading up to the centenary of the war, the last of those who actually experienced it have passed away. But the Imperial War Museums and the BBC had recorded interviews with many veterans to try to capture what it was like to actually be there. This series listens to those stories. July the 1st, 1916. The incessant crash of artillery stops. A silence more ominous than thundering guns. Then whistles. It is the start of one of the bloodiest battles ever, and the worst single day of carnage in the whole of British history. So many of us have ancestors who fought and died. The sacrifice of 60,000 men, killed and wounded, has been seen as a turning point, not just in the First World War, but in our national story.
0 hour. You hear the whistles going down the line, over the top. Everybody's watches synchronised. I take my Lewiston team over. Up, lads, good luck, and we were away.
On no account had we to stop for anything. Just walked straight through to Berlin.
We were going very well. We were in the front wave, and the right-hand battalion of the British Army going over.
After a massive 7-day bombardment, British forces attacked German lines in the Somme River Valley. This was meant to be the big push, the breakthrough.
We got into trouble almost at once. The Germans had got a tremendous lot of machine guns at Beaumont Hamel, and in spite of the terrific bombardment they'd gone through, they brought these machine guns up, and we became under very heavy machine gun fire and artillery concentration at various places.
As we move forward, having got through our own wire quite easily, we saw what a terrible job it was, or would be, to get through the German wire. It was so thick.
The majority of their wire wasn't cut at all. Not by our artillery at all. Not even by our trench mortars.
It looked solid black. Can't really say that I could pick out any single strand. It was so solid that, in my opinion, a rabbit couldn't have got through it.
Up pops the machine gun. And chained to this gun was a German.
I simply run. That was the only thing in my mind, run and dodge, expecting any second to feel it hit me, the bullet.
The first thing I did was to sling the gun on my arm, press the trigger, and sprayed right along the top to keep the heads down. That gave us a chance of getting in.
It's just like rain, but the machine guns, it's a rattle, and the effect is just like a scythe.
You could hear him when a bullet hit somebody against you, you know, you could hear it hit him. You'd hear him groan and go down.
Of the bullets whizzing past. That was all the time.
When the attack started, my regiment went over the top, and three companies up before was wiped out before they'd gone 100 yards.
So it was mainly machine gun that cut us up. Machine guns that cut us up.
Machine gun fire, rifle fire, simply decimated my regiment.
The Germans were standing up, firing out at us through holes in their front line. And I looked a little further and realised I'm the only one standing.
There we were, about 20 yards in front of the German wire, and there we had to stay for the simple reason that we were badly enfiladed by German machine guns from our left.
A man was running across the front of me, and he was immediately shot, and I saw that the contents of his wallet were flung out forward of me. Well, up to that point, I thought the major opposition had been coming from my left, but then I realised that we were also getting it from the right.
I could see they were wounded. I thought they were being shot as they got up, you know, and tried to move. I thought they were being shot again.
A sunken road ran across, and in negotiating that bad spot, there were quite a lot of casualties, and very soon we found that only a few of us were still going forward.
Casualties started coming back, walking casualties, men with their arms and smashed up, legs crawling, and they got back to the first aid and dressing stations the best way they could.
Oh, I looked round and I said, well, where the hell is everybody? And I turned round and came back.
At this time a hare ran along in front, to my great surprise, with its eyes bulging, or apparently bulging in fear, but I didn't think it was half as frightened as I was.
And there wasn't one of us in our battalion that ever got to the German lines.
A, B, C companies was shut down. All officers was killed and wounded. And most of the NGOs.
The British Army had horrible losses. And it is estimated that they lost within the first 10 minutes of the Battle of the Somme 14,000 dead.
Many units were obliterated before they even cleared their own front lines. Other survivors managed to hide in shell holes. Confronted with uncut barbed wire and strong German resistance, it was the only way of staying alive.
Fritz can't touch me, you know, because I'm in this shell hole, you see. But if he'd thrown a bomb or like that had it.
George Ashurst of the Lancashire Fusiliers could see the counterattack beginning in the Beaumont-Hamel sector to the west.
Looking back, I noticed the Royal Fusiliers on the left were running back to their trenches. What about me? If he comes over the top here, I'm for it all right. So I makes my mind up that I've got to move and move bloody quick. So I gets up all at once and dashes down this slope again and dives in the sunken road once more. Safe again, missed again.
Once you're in the front line, you don't stay there. You've got to get forward again to dig in about another 100 yards ahead.
One of the few that managed to get forward into German lines was Ernest Bryan, in command of a Lewis gun team at Maricourt, just north of the river.
We get there, we go forward. The Germans make a counterattack. We stay where we are. We fire at that counterattack. And it's repulsed more often than not.
It wasn't just the German machine guns, the uncut German wire, or their counterattacks that stopped the British walking all the way to Berlin.
My gun team, my number 2, was carrying a pannier containing 9 magazines. He also had 4 Mills bombs. 126-pound weight he was carrying. You're not going to go very far, however fit you are. You're not going far.
That's like carrying a small person on your back, across broken ground, in the heat of summer.
So you had an extra bandolier of rifle ammunition, a Mills bomb or 2 Mills bombs.
Yes.
A water bucket full of Lewis ammunition and a pickaxe.
Yeah.
And you had to carry all that.
Yes.
Now, did that impede your movement?
Very much so.
But when we got in the trench, the gun team were practically done. Not with the exertion of walking up and down shallows and through wire, but with the damn load they were carrying. Everything is down deep and up and slimy.
Did it make you less manoeuvrable in your
Yes,
movement?
indeed it did.
Could you run at all?
No, impossible.
It was actually impossible to run, was it?
There's a farm field at the back here, just being ploughed. Try walking 100 yards and see how you feel. And that is playground to what they had to go over, what you all had to go over in the Somme.
Under relentless machine gun fire, it's a miracle that anybody survived. Those that did had to live with their memories of the cataclysm, in vivid, harrowing, sometimes distorting detail.
And up above there were these great big 5.9 shrapnels going off. And I think they deadened me because I really had very little recollection.
Frank Rain spoke to historian Peter Hart of the Imperial War Museum over 7 decades later, in 1987.
Oral history isn't great for what actually happened in circumstances of great stress. The emotional impact is so much that almost that they're closing down what's going on around them. They're just concentrating on themselves and their own survival. When I listen back to Frank Rain's interview, he doesn't remember it in a linear fashion. It's a dreamlike state that he recalls. And I think it's probably because he's so focused with terror and fear that he can't really take any external factors in properly, so he just doesn't know what's happening. It's a haunting interview.
And as I walked back, which we were told, of course, not to do, we were supposed to walk until we were killed, I didn't see a soul in any shell hole or anything.
What about the officers and the NCOs? Where were they?
Never saw a soul. I never saw a soul all the time when I went over there.
Would you say you were in a normal mental state when you went over?
Definitely. Definitely everything was clear. We knew what we were doing. No, I knew what a shell hole was for when I got into that. Yes.
Were there not lots of wounded or dead or dying around in the area you were in then?
Never saw one. Never saw a soul to speak to or tender or anything.
The men would have the rest of their lives to try and understand what had happened and what they'd seen on the 1st of July 1916. The mental injuries were never really counted. The survivors were terribly traumatised, overwhelmed with memories of friends lost, of the screams of the wounded they couldn't help. Many carried a sense of guilt that random chance had condemned others to die while they lived. Basil Farrer, stretcher bearer for the Royal Army Medical Corps, was interviewed 70 years later.
And my only recollection of that day is going backwards and forwards and picking up. And as you're going along with the stretcher, you hear a faint call, stretcher bearer, wounded men. You'd go over, look on his shoulder. You're concerned with your own regiment. Sorry, chum, we're Yorks. Because if you're collected all and sundry back to your own regimental aid post, I mean, your medical officer had his hands full already with his own wounded. If you're going to take every wounded man back, they were strewn all over the shop like. It's hard to describe. Men all over on the floor, wounded.
The devastation was ghastly. A lot of dead men lying around. But I also remember particularly that the night that I looked over the parapet to find a right place to put my Lewis guns, that I saw all these little twinkling lights everywhere. As the flares were going up from the German lines, there was a whole twinkling, the whole area was twinkling to the ground. And it was pieces of tin which had been put on the haversacks of the division that had attacked on the 1st of July, lying with their face down, the packs were showing up, and these were all men who'd been shot down.
And it was pretty rough, very rough, all that day on the 1st of July, because Cherry Germans drove all our division and the other divisions back to the original front line from where we started from by night time on the 1st of July. It was back where we came from.
And there were perhaps a dozen of us or so actually kept out of the line on that day, and I was one of the fortunate ones. We heard as the day wore on that the Scottish had had a pretty rough time. When darkness came in the evening, they wanted somebody to go up and meet them and guide them back. And so I went up to a crossroads where I was to meet them. When I could distinguish them, I noticed about 100 men, I suppose, and the adjutant was leading them. So I said to him, which company is this, please? Company, he said. This is the regiment. About 800 men went over, and about 100 came back. And that was our Battle of the Somme.
What was morale like amongst what was left of, for instance?
It was never mentioned, and nobody said a word about it.
Why not? Because
well, I think they all sort of felt like me. They hadn't been killed or wounded, therefore they were, in a sense, guilty.
That's how you felt, is it?
Yes.